Good morning, everyone, or good evening, wherever you are. God is good. It's me, Ari Dosset Khan Rashid. I'm your anthropologist and zoologist. If you're Italian, come Emiliano. Thank you very much. Listen, hit the like button, share this live stream, subscribe to the channel, become a member of the channel. Don't the links below. Thank you very much. If you wish to book a session with me, a one-on-one consultation, check the fees and instructions in the description box below. You can buy my novels on Amazon, Barnes& and Noble, where you can find them. And above all, I want you to pay close attention to the live stream, take notes, pray about it afterwards, and where this knowledge applies in your life, apply this knowledge to glorify Heavenly Father. Thank you. This is my second live stream for today, where I'm exposing the Greek abominations that the world is still worshiping. And what does it mean to worship something or someone? It means to derive value out of it for yourself, extracting value for one's inner self out of something that's worship, right over there. So what you worship is what you've completely surrendered onto. Okay? Now, in my previous live stream day to day about the deity Persephone, I already explained what the ancient Greeks meant with the underworld. Um, so a quick recap over here. Uh, okay, let's talk about a quick recap. Social death, also referred to as social suicide, is an extreme social rejection or disenfranchisement of someone by wider society. It refers to when the targeted people is treated as if they are dead or non-existent. It is used by sociologists such as Patterson and Zygmunt Bauman in Storage of Slavery and the Holocaust to describe the part played by governmental and social segregation in the process. Social debt is defined by three aspects: a loss of social identity, a loss of social connectedness, and a loss associated with disintegration of the body. Some examples over here, like racial, gender exclusion, slavery, apartheid, persecution, outlaws, prosecute criminals in ancient times, Athens, ancient Athens, institutionalization, segregation of those labeled with mental illness, decision identity of the individual. And so social debt simply means the community or wider society declares you dead, you don't exist. Even though you're still alive, they act like you don't matter at all. They ignore you to the full. They don't even attack you, they don't even argue with you, they don't even fight you, just act like you don't even exist. Like they don't want to they don't want you to exist so much that they don't even want to fight you. Now, civil death is similar to it, but civil debt is more from the side of the government. Let's read civil debt, Latin civilitaire mortuus, is a loss of all or almost all civil rights by a person due to a conviction for a felony or due to an act by the government of a country that results in a loss of civil rights. It is usually inflicted upon persons convicted of crimes against the state or adults determined by a court to be legally incompetent because of mental disability. In medieval Europe, felons lost all civil rights upon a conviction. This civil death often led to actual death since anyone could kill and injure a felon with impunity. Under the Holy Roman Empire, a person declared civilly dead was referred to as vogelvrij, in Dutch vogelvrij, English free as a bird, and could even be killed since they were completely outside the law. Historically, outlawry, that is, declaring a person as an outlaw, was a common form of civil death. Under English common law, a living person could, under certain conditions, be considered legally dead. The three categorized generally recognized as resulting in civil death were profession, abjuration, and banishment. In the US, the disenfranchisement of felons has been called a form of civil death, as has been subject to collateral consequences in general. The contention is not generally supported by legal scholars. Civil death such as remains part of the law in New York, Rhode Island, and the Virgin Islands. In China, counts of civil death is embodied in a punishment known as the deprivation of political rights. It's, okay, we don't have to go into that right now, but okay, social death and civil death. Civil death is when the government declares that your life doesn't matter at all, so they don't even you're not even important enough for them to protect you. And social death is when the community decides that you don't matter. Now, social death often also result in civil death, and it can actually to actual you actually dying physically due to neglect or due to impoverishment, and also to mental breakdowns. Yeah. So people that were uh, banned like this, they were still alive. They would able to inhabit impoverished neighborhoods as vagabonds, or they may still have a job and all of that, but they will be the neglected part of town. So that's what ghettos are about. Now, the term ghetto itself is not ancient. Ghettos are also called peripheries. A periphery is something that's more at the edge of an establishment. A periphery is something that's considered less important. That's what it gets less care. So peripheries have existed throughout human history. The term ghetto did not exist, but nevertheless, what they call a ghetto existed before even the term came into existence. Now, the peripheries of the world, or no, the ghettos of the world, are what the ancient Greeks called the underworld. So let's go now to this fallen angel, Hades, whom they call the king of the underworld, god of the dead and the riches. Dead and the riches. With dead here, it refers to those who were socially and civilly dead. Riches here refer to the financial, either the financial survival of those in the ghettos or the financial profit society makes of keeping these ghettos in existence. But anyway, we're going to read now. Hades, later in ancient Greek religion and mythology, is the god of the dead and rich and the king of the underworld, with which his name became synonymous. Hades was the eldest son of Cronus and Rhea, although this also made him the last son to be regurgitated by his father. He and his brothers Zeus and Poseidon defeated, overthrew, and replaced their father's generation of gods, the Titans, and he claimed joint sovereignty over the cosmos. Hades received the underworld, Zeus the sky, and Poseidon the sea, with the solid earth, which was long the domain of Gaia, available to all three concurrently. In artistic depictions, Hades is typically portrayed holding a trident and wearing his helm, with Cerberus, the three-headed guard dog of the underworld, standing at his side. Roman era, Roman era mythographers eventually equated the Etruscan god Aita and the Roman gods Dispata and Orcus with Hades, and merged all three figures into Pluto, a Latinization of Pluton, itself a euphemistic title meaning the rich one, often given to Hades. The origin of Hades' name is uncertain, but it's generally seen as meaning the unseen one since antiquity. Or unseen one, that is interesting. And you could go on and on about that, but uh, so so we don't have to go into the stories and all of that. We all in my previous live stream, I addressed how in the myth of Persephone, Hades kidnapped her and turned his niece and turned her into his wife and queen of the underworld. Uh, so let's go to the king of the underworld section over here. Despite connotation of death as evil, Hades was more altruistically inclined in Platonic philosophy. Hades was portrayed as passive and seldom portrayed negatively. His role was often maintaining relative balance. That said, he was also depicted as ruthless, hateful, and stern, and he held all of his subjects equally accountable to his laws. He was the key holding jailer. The souls of the dead were his prisoners. Any other individual aspect of his personality are not given, as the Greeks refrained from giving him too much thought to avoid attracting his attention. Whoa. So this deity, this fallen angel that they worshipped, uh, represented the ghettos. It represented the peripheries of society, the places that people didn't want to be associated with, the places people didn't want to even come near. So whatever happened over there, people act like they didn't see it. I mean, if someone gets stabbed in the middle of a city center, also known as downtown in North America, if someone got stabbed in downtown Toronto, for example, or someone got stabbed in the city center of London or city center of The Hague or Amsterdam or Tokyo or even Rio de Janeiro, People are going to think, what the heck is this? Arrest them, get it solved. People are concerned. If someone got stabbed in some periphery somewhere in some slum in Brazil, or someone got stabbed in some ghetto at the edge of New York City, I don't think nobody's going to be concerned, but people think, oh yeah, it's a ghetto. People kind of brush it off, don't give it much thought. It's not that we look much sleep over it overnight, except the victims, the relatives of the victim, of course, or sometimes the perpetrators. But get this: a ghetto or a periphery, it's also called periphery. Peripheries are areas of society where people don't want to come, don't be associated with. And if you are associated with it, people will abandon you, they will ghost you, unfriend you, unlink from you. Why? Because peripheries, also known as ghettos, they are the result of collective abandonment. When the community or wider society abandons you, you might as well be dead. Because for your survival, you need food, water, shelter. For your emotional needs, for your sexual needs, you are not even considered. If you need to stay alive, you may end up having to steal in order to survive, or steal food or whatever, because nobody is looking after you. So, and once you steal, now you could live with a thief. Now you as an excuse against you, which in prison or to take your life, whatever. So, honestly, as a human being, you are interdependent on others. As a child, you're fully dependent. As an adult, you're interdependent. And as an interdependent creature, you're still dependent. So, you being abandoned by your community, man, that's a death sentence. They don't kill you on the spot, but they might as well kill you on the spot because you're not going to survive that. So, the underworld was the sphere of society where abundant people were still alive, but in impoverished, declining, sick conditions. And they served as a warning, as an example to the rest of society and the rest and other communities that if they ever question society or if they ever upset the public too much, the same could happen to them. So it works both ways. Those that are either banned to the ghettos or those supporting ghettos, they know that, okay, we're considered dead. Only way is for us to be redeemed and by society, give us some from society needs to give us an opportunity. And for those who were born in quote unquote better neighborhoods or better parts of town, they know, okay, if I just avoid people from the ghetto over there, then I'm going to be good. Chances I'm not like them. All right. So that's why the Greeks refrained from giving um, HADES too much attention because they did not want to end up in the being in a sphere of in the world of the bonded people. Hades ruled the dead, assisted by others over whom he had complete authority. Now, and understand the following: when people are abundant and they're still alive, they still need some people to manage them. All human beings need management. Children need management. We call it babysitting. When adults need management, we call it the government. All humans need management. The only human that doesn't need management is Jesus Christ, God Almighty in the flesh. But you're not Christ, so you need management. Okay? I don't care how so-called independent you think you need management. Okay? All of us do. Now, those abundant people were still alive. Who's managing them? Now, the government doesn't pay much mind to them. So who will pay mind to them? And that will be the criminals. Criminals, whether they're just predators or pirates or smugglers or traffickers, whatever, criminals now have full sway over those people who are abundant. Now, they do this with consent from the government, of course, because the government should be the one looking after these people. And the community itself also facilitates this bad condition. So these criminals don't just show up and claim ownership like that. They were granted, indirectly were granted symbolic ownership, because the only real owners, Heavenly Father, they were granted symbolic ownership over these abundant people. So all the drug pins in the world, all the crime bosses, all those uh, cartel leaders, criminal cartel leaders who run slums or run ghettos like that informally is modeled after the 80s. Okay, let's continue. Hades ruled to death, assisted by others over whom he had complete authority. The house of Hades was described as full of guests, though he rarely left the underworld. He cared little about what happened in the world above, as his primary attention was assuring none of his subjects ever left his domain. And there's something you need to understand. Once you've been declared socially dead by your community or by society, or once the government declares you civilly dead, the purpose is that you eventually crash and die. Look, if they want to murder you, they need an excuse, and that's why they call it execution when they do it in a legal way. It's still murder, but it's done in a legal way. If they don't have the death penalty in that jurisdiction, then the one they can do is life imprisonment. But then they still need to keep you alive, and need to invest finances to keep you in prison. So ghettos or peripheries are an open air prison where they don't put you behind bars in a building, preventing you from physically leaving. You're just in an open air settlement, but if you leave, you have no support. If you leave, you'll be ostracized. But if you stay, things are bad. All right. So the thing is, when society declares someone dead, it simply means that they want to get rid of them. Now, if someone is a child molester, or someone is a serial killer, or someone actually is a horrible human being that continuously brings harm to the community over and over again, it's understandable that people want them gone. But even then, declaring someone dead or still alive is a no-go. So when society or the local community, or when the local community, there's different society and community. Okay, I explained often on this channel. When a wide society or a local community decides to declare someone dead, they already made up their mind that they don't want to face on issues, because this is what it comes down to. Human beings in this fallen state, they externalize pain and discomfort. Instead of owning up discomfort, face themselves and look for psychological help and go into therapy, whatever it is they need, human beings often externalize the pain. They associate their pain and discomfort with someone else, and now they fake like it's the other individual causing them the pain and discomfort. Now they say, I don't like this guy, I can't stand him. Who do you think he is? Who do you think she is? Oh, what? They look for an excuse to label other individual as less than human and as a negative object. Why? So that they can project their unrest, their unease on the other individual. This is done by individuals and done by groups. When it's done by groups, it's quite deadly, because if an individual does it, others always say, what are you doing? But if groups of people do it, get along with it, I'm telling you, if you're the target of collective dislike or collective hatred, you're dead. So this is just toxic projection. Now, projection is a human ability. An architect that designs a mall or a monument, he looks at the landscape and he projects his vision onto the landscape that he puts on paper, and later they build it with construction workers. Every building you see out there in the world, or every cityscape, was first in imagination that architects and construction workers projected. An artist makes a beautiful painting, it's this projection he worked out on, uh, on the canvas. And in every novel that's written, and I'm a novelist myself, is a projection of a story someone put documents. So understand this: projection is a natural human ability. However, projections also, unfortunately, often misused and abused. Toxic projection, also known as narcissistic projection, is when people refuse to look within and admit that they need help and management, and they now project that unrest, also the pain added by own denial, onto someone else. It's unfair, it's pathetic, it's horrible and disgusting. Nevertheless, human beings do this. It's it's kind of norm in the world to do this, y'all. So once people label someone as the problem and the individual disappears, they get relief, or the problem is dealt with. The thing is, they're still in unrest, but at least psychologically, they are relieved, because the so-called external problem that they envision is gone. If the individual they did dirty shows up again, it's going to remind people of what they've done, to remind them of how unworthy they've been, and people don't want to do that. So once you were declared socially dead or civilly dead, once you were once you were subject to civil death or social death, once you were banned, you were meant to just die off over time. So that's what this represents over here, is that that HADES, this deity, was mainly focused on making sure those that were banned remained in these impoverished conditions or with a back stigma, why or else would upset regular people in society. Let's continue. He strongly forbade the subjects to leave his domain and would become quite enraged when anyone tried to leave, or if someone tried to steal the souls from his realm. So if anyone, if you're banned by if you are abundant and you show up back in the community or in society, you are a confrontation that people don't want to be confronted with. Nobody wants to deal with that. Or if you are kind-hearted, you want to help out someone who's been abandoned by the community or by society, they will explode on you too. Because who do you think you are trying to save the world, blah, blah, blah. Okay, let's continue. I'm decoding the myth for you while I'm going through it. His wrath was equally terrible for anyone who tried to cheat death or otherwise cross him, as Sisyphus and PLUTO found out to their sorrow. While usually indifferent to his subjects, Hades was very focused on the punishment of these two people, particularly PLUTO, as he entered the underworld in an attempt to steal Persephone for himself, and consequently was forced onto the chair of forgetfulness. Another myth is about the Greek god Asclepius, who was originally a demigod, son of Apollo, and Coronis, a Thessalonian princess. During his lifetime, he became a famous and talented physician who eventually was able to bring the dead back to life. Feeling cheated, Hades pursued Zeus to kill him with a thunderbolt. After his death, Asclepius was brought to Olympus, where he became a god. Hades was only depicted outside of the underworld once in the myth, and even that is believed to have been an instance where he had just left the gates of the underworld, which was when Heracles shot him with an arrow as Hades was damned to defend the city of Pylos. After he was shot, however, he traveled to Olympus to heal. Besides Heracles, the only other living people who ventured to the underworld were also heroes: Odysseus, Aeneas, Orpheus, to whom Hades showed uncharacteristically mercy at Persephone's urging, was moved by Orphic music. This used with Pirithous and in later romance Psyche. None of them were pleased with what they witnessed in the realm of the dead. In particular, the Greek war hero Achilles, whom Odysseus conjured with a blood libation, said, "O shining Odysseus, never try to console me for dying. I would rather follow his plow as thrall to another man, one with no land allotted to him, and not much to live on, than be a king over all the perished dead." Then, okay. So, this is clear over here. And now let's go to Pluto. It's the same deity. In ancient Greek religion and mythology, Pluto was the ruler of the underworld. The earlier name for the god was Hades, which became more common as the name of the underworld itself. Pluto represents the more positive concept of the god who presides over the afterlife. Pluton was frequently conflated with Plutos, the Greek god of wealth, because mineral wealth was found on the ground, and because as a chthonic god, Pluto ruled the deep earth that contained the seeds necessary for a bountiful harvest. The name Pluton came into widespread usage with the Eleusinian mysteries, in which Pluto was venerated as both a stern ruler and a loving husband to Persephone. Yeah, the niece who he kidnapped, molested, and turned into his spouse. Yeah, the couple received souls in the afterlife and are invoked together in religious inscriptions, being referred to as Pluton and as Kore, respectively. Hades, by contrast, had few temples and religious practices associated with him, and is portrayed as a dark and violent abductor of Persephone. Pluto and Hades differ in character, but they are not distinct figures and share two dominant myths. In Greek cosmology, the god received the rule of the underworld in a three-way division of sovereignty over the world, with his brother Zeus ruling the sky and his brother Poseidon sovereign over the sea. His central narrative in myth is him abducting Persephone to be his wife and queen of his realm. Pluton, as the name of the ruler of the underworld, first appears in Greek literature of the classical period in the works of the Athenian playwrights and the philosopher Plato, which are the major Greek source on its significance. Under the name Pluto, the god appears in other myths as secondary role, most as the possessor of a quest object, especially in the descent of Orpheus and or other heroes to the underworld. Pluto, gender Plutonis, is a Latinized form of the Greek Pluton. Pluto's Roman equivalent is Dis Pater, whose name is most often taken to mean rich father, and is perhaps a direct translation of Pluton. Pluto was also identified with the obscure Roman Orcus, like Hades, the name of both a god of the underworld and the underworld as a place. Pluto, Pluton in French and German, Plutone in Italian became the most common name for the classical ruler of underworld in subsequent West literature and other art forms. So, so what we need to get here is that, you know what, before I continue, let me just read this a little bit more. The name Pluton does not appear in Greek literature of the Archaic period. In Hesiod's Theogony, the six children of Cronos and Rhea are Zeus, Hera, Poseidon, Hades, Demeter, and Hestia. The male children divide the world in three realms. Yeah, okay. Pluto's wealth appears in Theogony as a child of Demeter and Liason. Find Plutus, who goes upon the whole earth and the broad back of the sea, and whoever meets him and comes into his hands, that man he maketh rich, and he bestows much wealth upon him. Okay. Sympathetic magic. Now, all of this is not that relevant here. What I here, the rape of Proserpina, or the rape of Persephone. This depicts Pluto, also known as Hades, kidnapping the Nephilim, Persephone. Now, this could have actually happened that this fallen angel took advantage of this Nephilim, but even that is not really relevant here. All right, I explained to you what the words of Persephone or Proserpina refers to, and now I'm addressing Pluto or Hades himself. So, what it comes down to is the following: society abandons a portion of its people. No matter what the reason is, they abandon some people. And most people they abandon, they don't have a good reason to do so. So they want these people to be under a stigma of victimization. So the peripheries, also as ghettos, are where these abandoned people are contained. There are various informal policies. I say informal because often they wouldn't do it formally by law, but there are informal policies in companies, even in government policies, where specific neighborhoods or towns are quote unquote forgotten or they're prohibited from receiving certain services. They keep the ghettos around to provide non supply to the rest of the population so the population has a reason to feel good about themselves. So wherever you go in history, anytime there was a ghetto, there was always a criminal sect or a criminal cult that governed the people over there. We're just informal government. So an informal government is a government that's tolerated by the actual government because actual government doesn't want to get involved. Now, in these peripheries, a lot of sexual violence go down. I'm not saying that in side there's no sexual violence. I mean, of course there is. But in these peripheries, all sexual violence goes down. But the difference is, in the ghettos, it's not as accepted and approved, but it's kind of welcomed. Like, okay, this is a periphery, so we expect things to go down over here. You don't want to be in a ghetto, you need to be accepted by society. That does not mean that people in the ghettos approve of sexual violence. No, but the thing is, yeah, it's a ghetto. You can't expect better over here. Now, so I wanted to read a little bit from a book over here, and let me see. This is the name of the book over here. I'm not going to read all of it, of course not, but there's a little bit I want to read over here, just to hold on. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about funerals, and why do I want to do that? Because If you understand funerals, you also understand a bit more about this god of the underworld thing. And hold on, I need to go over here for the, hold on. Okay, here it is. Okay, so let's read. An old adage about funerals not being for the dead for the living serves as an important sociological primer. It encourages us to theorize death as a social relation rather than simply an existential endpoint or spiritual beginning, an unsurprising starting point for the discipline of sociology. Perhaps how sociology should engage with that is an interesting methodological question. If we agree that it is impossible to comprehend the huge numbers of deaths occurring every day with the same level of personal interest, emotional attachment, and subjective investment as our own mortality, as philosopher Thomas Nagel urges, then what sociology follows? Are we to simply assert that the qualitative researchers focus on small numbers can research experiences of death, dying, and bereavement, while those studying large impersonal data sets stick dispassionately to the numbers? This is a crude summary, but it does seem to hold when we consider the kinds of research typically conducted on funerals. Most sociologists researching the funeral industry, yeah, this thing as a funeral industry, y'all. Yeah, it is. Do so at close quarters. While most data and analysis of financial trends come from the funeral, finance, and insurance industries themselves. Okay. Reviewing the sociological trends around death, dying, bereavement some 3 decades ago, Walter 993 asked why there had been both a lack of engagement and recent renaissance in the sociological interest in death. One answer to the former, he tentatively suggests, was that by the time many people die, they have become socially near redundant. That is, they have typically retired from work, passed on any knowledge and capital they may have to their children or next of kin, and slowly participated less and less in the throes of social life. Coupled with the many sequestrations thesis, describing how modern bureaucratic management removes death from public gaze, we are left with millions of individual deaths, funerals, and disposals. Death therefore disrupts not society, but individual, who is left alone without traditional rituals. Similarly, in arguing for death's centrality in the sociology of the body, Schilling claimed that the individualized orientations we have developed towards our bodies have what leaves us increasingly alone with our bodies in the space of death. Such arguments came at a time when social theory was being shaped in part by influential theories of hyper-individualization. For sociological overview critical of this tendency within death and dying literature especially, see Howard. While not limited to the works of Ulrich Beck, Anthony Giddens, and Zygmunt Bauman alone, their respective works on individualization in late or liquid modernity were highly influential within the discipline and inimical to the kind of class analysis presented in so much critical political economy preceding it. Now, that's enough for now. Just understand the following. Today, death is mainly considered a private matter of those that outlive the individual that pass away. Now, in sociology, they research and address group dynamics of society. In anthropology, they um, they investigate, research, and explain root philosophies of why things are shaped and function a certain way. So anthropology and sociology are similar, but they're not the same. I'm both an anthropologist and a sociologist. I do both. So sociology doesn't bother too much with the topic of death because they're focused on the group dynamics, those who are alive now. In anthropology, we acknowledge that death shapes culture also. So we want to figure out what's the role of death in this community or in society. Now, in the modern world, and I would say the world developed after the 1950s, Death, death is something private. For example, if your grandmother passed away, or your child or spouse, whoever close to you, or a good friend of yours passed away, you take free from work, go to funeral, grieve, and go slowly go back to work, and life continues. Only if the individual passed away was a celebrity or a political figure or someone with a big following, then would there be a public goodbye because the public needs to process what happened. Now, in ancient times, you can even read in the Bible, there were days of mourning declared. If something tragic happened in a community, especially if especially if it's something of um, societal importance, like if something big, like a king died, or a country was invaded, or there was an earthquake that happened and people died. It was something big. There'll be days of mourning, of mourning were declared. In those days of mourning, you're not supposed to work. You're not supposed to have any party celebrations. You're the focus. Everyone had to grieve. Now, it's not so that with every human death that there was a period of mourning in the community. No. Sometimes there was a period of mourning just for a local town or local neighborhood, not for the whole community, the whole nation. But days of mourning, sometimes it was 6 days of mourning, 7 days, sometimes 40 days. Why does he have these days of mourning? Because this is the science behind it. When something tragic or traumatizing happens, if people don't process it immediately, it will damage them mentally, emotionally, and eventually physically in the long run. So if they don't process it immediately, that means that they get deformed by it. They can still, if they still like process it later on, but the longer the process is delayed, the worse the healing process is going to be. Because the healing process will be more painful often than the actual trauma you've been through. So if something tragic or traumatic happens and you process it immediately, then the idea is you won't develop long-term psychological and physical health effects because of it. So you can actually close that chapter and start afresh. That's the idea. Now, this does not mean that what they call closure, that is totally out of your mind, that is even possible. Especially if it was trauma that affected your physical body directly, like you were shot or stabbed or whatever. Your body never forgets because the effect on your nerve system is still there as long as you live. But the thing is, it's not closure like in the modern era we call closure of, well, it's over now, it never happened. No, that type of closure talk about does not exist. Actual idea of closure is not even biblical. The thing is, you cannot forget the tragedy or the traumatic event, but you can process it, give it a place, so that it's incorporated in your history, so that you can be effective and healthy in the present. That's the idea. So it's not that chapter close does not mean that the chapter didn't happen. It just means the chapter is a history that explains the present. Now, you want me to? No, no. You can look it up in the Old Testament yourself, where days of mourning declared, enforced, all of that. Now listen to me. Even today, there are times when bad and terrorist attacks happen or whatever, that days of mourning and grieving are installed by some presidents or political leaders. Now understand the following: if an individual does not process what happened immediately or as soon as possible, they become a liability not towards themselves but other people. Now, can you always make sure, can you always guarantee that people always process bad things immediately? No. However, if something big happens, like a traffic accident, a lot of people witness it, you need to make sure people get a psychological assistance the very moment. When I was younger, in my, I'd say early teens, mid teens, often I would read about car accidents happening, and or something bad happened in public, someone collapsed, whatever, and the government, I mean the local government, the city government would send psychologists there to give psychological care to the people that witness it. I often thought, why are they doing this? It's only late in life I understood that this is what you should be doing. Now, if something traumatic or horrible happens to in a place and a group of people are traumatized by it, if that group of people does not process it immediately, then you're going to have a lot of people suffering things similar to PTSD or paranoia and all this other stuff. Now, don't get me wrong. Processing something does automatically mean you have become healthy again. It does automatically mean that you're better now. It simply means that you're now able to move on. You're able to look for better. And the thing is, it's not that the authorities care that much about individual well-being of the people. It's that they want the community or rest of our society to function and not end up in people going back and forth fighting off one another, which is the result when traumatic events aren't processed. And here's here's one thing I want you to realize: a ghetto, or also known as a periphery, is meant to be a neglected, abandoned place where you're not even considered, you're not even important. For example, there are people from ghettos who witnessed horrible things growing up, and they themselves don't realize how horrible those things were until later at work they talk to someone about it, and the other people get silent at the table. They look at what the hell. Okay, for example, you hear stories of um, people who grew up in ghettos that were beaten with belts by their mothers, for example, or or fathers who walked in and they got terrified that they may not survive if they spoke the wrong way. And sometimes people laugh this off with dark humor, but then their spouse or the colleagues at work or the people around kind of get uncomfortable, walk away like they're terrified. And you think, what happened? The individual himself, herself doesn't realize how horrible it is what happened to them. They don't realize how that they've been damaged because they can't realize how horrible it is. It's only when they see the reaction of people with a relatively healthier upbringing they realize, oh my God, this was bad. I've spoken to people, I'm not going to mention names, of course, not necessary. I've spoken to people who told me about how their father would call their mothers bitch, hoe, trash, you ain't shit, and all that over and over again. And I said, dude, no, I don't care if your mom indeed was sexually loose and a horrible woman. Your dad chose to have sex with her, right? He chose to put his dick inside of her and make her pregnant, right? Even if the pregnancy wasn't planned, I don't care. He needs to take responsibility. He chose to get into that woman. He should have known better than to just be with a woman that's horrible like that. Why is he with her and he's abusing her in front of you, harming you guys too? If he is such a low life, that if he's so low life and suicidal that he doesn't care about how others treat him, if he's harming himself by staying with a toxic woman, hey, we can't help it. That's him. And if your mother keeps herself in this situation, that's her. But come on now, their children involved. What the heck is this? And let me tell you, I'm not saying that in wider society such things don't happen. The thing is, in ghettos, it's more loose for horrible things to happen because the psychological well-being of the people are not even considered that much. They're told to toughen up, grow up, you're not to shout anymore, stop blaming other people. Or if you're a man, tell you, pull yourself by your bootstraps, as say in the United States. Or they'll say, be a man, you're a grown man now, stop blaming other people, stop taking responsibility. They'll always gaslight the damaged people like the damaged people are the problem, even though damaged people realize, well, don't mean, but we didn't choose to be damaged. I mean, what is this? Now, are the people from ghettos were actually reprobates and wasteful? Yes, but it doesn't automatically mean that just because they're from the ghetto, that it's all on them. Now, listen to what I'm saying over here. Trauma is often not addressed in ghettos at all. Trauma is often the way they do things in a ghetto. And that's why some from the ghetto, when they go to wider society, often, or go abroad to visit other communities, they tend to relate better with the darkness in those other places and the people who are there because they come from dark place themselves. But here's the thing: those from the ghettos, 9 10 times, they know they come from a dark place. You don't even have to tell them. While people in wider society, they often don't admit the darkness they were around. Just because the darkness was less doesn't mean it wasn't darkness. Now, the worship of HADES, also known as PLUTO, the purpose of it is to make sure that people in peripheries, either were born to the periphery or were born periphery, they stay within the periphery. Rarely, and it's something modern, and it's not something ancient, rarely will someone from a periphery be accepted in wider society. And that will often only happen if they sell out people back home in the periphery, also known as a ghetto. Now, don't get me wrong. A lot of people from ghettos don't want to face how bad situation is, and therefore they keep themselves in a bad situation. Now, that's on them. Such people, you can't help them. You need to move on from them. So if you're from, for example, you have a lot of times rappers in the United States amongst the African Americans. Well, that's how they call the African Americans. Should be that's not really how they call themselves, but anyway, what they call amongst the Black Americans, a lot of times you have these men that escape the hood, what they call it, they escape the ghetto. They become a famous rapper, or just succeed in life in general, financially. They go back to their hometown, the neighborhood they grew up in, want support and help the people out, and they end up murdered. It happens over and over again. It is because these men didn't understand that people have to own up to their bad situation and decide they want better. If the people in the ghetto decide we want better and they insist on wanting better, guess what? Eventually, the ghetto has to be abolished. Things have to be renewed. But often, a lot of people take comfort in the escapism that the ghetto offers, whether it's gang banging, drug use, or whatever, or hang around the neighborhood aimlessly, whatever it is. So they don't want to change for the better. Well, that's on them. That they came from periphery, that's not their fault. But the fact they claim to periphery, well, that's on them. Now, Jesus himself, Christ, grew up in a periphery called Nazareth. When he went back as a grown man, they did attempt a murder on him. He went back a second time with disciples. They didn't attempt a murder on him this time, but they were quite hateful towards him, and Christ never went back. Nazareth was a ghetto. And it's Jesus that elevated the situation, the position of Nazareth, but the people there, they don't want Jesus to be the one they had to owe credit to for elevating the position. So they were offended at him. Now, one of the reasons why Christ was resisted is because he came from a periphery. Galilee, which was the Roman province where Nazareth was situated, Galilee was considered a bad place, like not good to come from Galilee. So he was from periphery himself. Christ was. So being from periphery, there was a low expectation of him, both from the people within the periphery and people outside the periphery. That's why his hometown Nazareth was offended with the glory Christ was showing in his ability to teach and have a following. Now, so understand this. I don't know if you're from a ghetto or not. That wasn't your choosing anyway, but listen to me. You cannot help people who don't want to admit that they need to be helped. You can't. People have to be in on their own improvement. So understand this. The worship of Pluto, also known as Hades, is still ongoing. Even though they don't always use the name Hades or Pluto, no, sometimes they do, this fallen angel is assigned to monitor the ghettos of the world and to make sure that people who were trapped in it, either by birth or by banishment, end up dying there. And to facilitate this, there are criminal organizations established to make this happen. I'm telling you, a lot of these criminal organizations out there are funded by society itself to make sure the abandoned people end up dying in their abandonment. That's it. The goal is that once you're declared socially or civilly dead, you cannot come back. And that's the problem they have with Christ, with Christianity. In real Christianity, Christ himself was murdered and he rose from the dead. Now, you can't raise yourself from the dead, hell no. Christ will resurrect you at the last day. But now the resurrection power is in you. So if society decides to violate you by abandoning you, you can overrule society's abandonment and it will backfire on them. And the only movement in history able to offer this and able to do this is Christianity. I'm talking about the real Christianity, not the pagan Christian system they built over time. And that's the problem the world has with believers. Believers are the only ones who can overrule and backfire abandonment by society or abandonment by the group. No religion and no philosophy can do this. Only thing religion philosophy can do is give you ways to cope once people decide to abandon you. But they cannot make people go against their own decision against you. Now, if people decide to abandon you and they're forced to go against their own decision, they will turn like a zombie. Just like Pharaoh and the ancient Egyptians opposed Moses. When Moses came to free the Israelites, the same way they will oppose you. They will turn into reprobate zombies the more they refuse to give up this low claim over you. So this is why also a lot of believers are afraid to walk in power, which is terrible. There's no excuse for believers doing this. Because the moment you operate in the resurrection power of Christ in prayer and fasting and continue in a state of joy, you it's symbolically you're resurrecting people from the dead. Symbolically. In the sense that people who've been deemed unworthy and abandoned suddenly have a future again, and people have no choice but to comply with them. And when people are forced to comply against their own will, apply against their own determination, people are going to get stressed out, upset, they're going to have mental breakdowns because of it, and they're going to start crashing and losing it. So the gospel brings healing and recovery. At the same time, those that resist healing and recovery, those that resist laying down violence, will be destroyed internally and externally by their own resistance. And this is why the gospel, the real gospel, is hated worldwide, Joe. That's why the name Jesus, that's why Jesus Christ, the name of Christ, is the most hated name in the world. The most famous, the most known name worldwide in history, but also the most hated one because society can't escape anymore with Christ around. Society can't victimize at ease and be left alone anymore. It will backfire. That's why they hate him. Amen. But anyway, someone said something over here. Okay, hold on. Let me see. It's crazy. It was a rapper from the west side of Chicago named Young PLUTO. He murdered a lot of people and ended up dying of a brutal death himself. PLUTO, 2X is his name. Or actually was his name if he's dead. Um, Something more I want to read with you very quickly. Um, I'm not going to read all of it, just a little bit. It's from this article over here. You can find it online yourself. It's a Reader Review article. From a historical point of view, the ghetto was established in medieval Europe. As I mentioned before, the ghetto we talk about over here. So there's a type of periphery they call the ghetto. Now, peripheries existed long before the Middle Ages. But that's what I mean. When you do research, you need to check which terms are they using, where terms come from. But okay, let's continue. Perhaps due to the power of stereotypical representation of ghettos in the United States, and more recently the rise of the ghetto fabulous discourse, it is seldom acknowledged that the term ghetto in fact comes from Renaissance 6th century Venice. The first Jewish generation was settled in Venice under permission of Venetian government in 1382. The residents made a living by lending money, doing business, and medicine. Jews were allowed to keep their customs and manage their own affairs. However, the Jews lost their status and were seen as a source of moral corruption and carriers of diseases for strengthening the regional power and the eruption of syphilis. In 1516, around 700 Jews were banished to the Ghetto Nuevo. It was an island located in the northwest edge of the city, and the entry was controlled by two gates, which were locked at sunset. The Ghetto Vecchio, and, and the Ghetto Nocissimo were built following the establishment of Ghetto Nuovo. Ghetto surrounded by water and high walls. All the windows and doors were sealed. Police guarded the entry and patrolled through canals. Jews could leave the ghetto in mourning for economic activities, but they had to wear yellow badges out of the ghetto, yellow circles for men and yellow scarves for women, and they were forced back to the ghetto before sunset. For time and spatial confinement, Jews had limited communication with the outer world. Therefore, they reserved their own culture and developed their own institutions and administrative priorities within the walls. Everything from synagogues to markets, from schools to charities, followed the development behind the ghetto walls. This was a type of Italian ghetto where they confined the Ashkenazi community. Well, maybe there were Sephardic Jews too, but anyway, let's continue. Now, Japan, let's go to the Japanese version of here. Burakumi were seen officially as rural outcasts and the lowest class in Tokugawa era, 1603 till 1868. The Tokugawa government divided people into four classes: samurai, peasant, artisan, and merchant. Burakumi ranked behind merchant and were usually formed of hinin and eta. Hinin includes town guards, street cleaners, and executioners. Eta includes butchers, tanners, leather makers, and undertakers. Hold on a minute. Both hinin and eta are discriminated words. Hinin means non-human, and eta means filth in Japanese. They are all untouchable in the eyes of Buddhism and Shinto. Buddhism and Shinto are the main religious establishments in Japan. Burakumin had to obey various rules which were set legally. First, they lived in Buraku only and could enter the town during daytime. Secondly, they had to wear yellow collars and to walk on barefoot. Thirdly, they were forced to drop on their hands and knees when met commoners. The fourth rule: marriages were limited. They could marry with Burakumi. Burakumi were emancipated in 1871. They could move into cities, but with notorious conditions. For instance, live in districts around garbage dumps, jails, or crematoria with high crime rate and messy social order. Job opportunities hanged in the range between low-paying and dirty works. Separated schools established for them to be educated. Permanent marks of Burakumin stay still for the existence of a family registration system in Japan. The Burakumin Defense League counted that around 3 million Burakumin were trapped in 6,000 ghettos in Japanese cities in the late 1970s. According to some Japanese citizens, they said it is difficult for Burakumin to find a job because they will be identified by the address information even nowadays. Whoa! So Japan was open about this back in the day. In a more modern era, they're still doing it, but do it in a more hidden way, even by law. So, wow. Let's go to the African American ghetto. After the First World War, a huge influx of African migrated from the north to the south in America. On one hand, this phenomenon was a result from the Jim Crow racism. On the other hand, the mushrooming industries needed unskilled labor for speedily expanding economy. However, as later 2009 mentioned that the mass African migrants was seen by whites as a disturbing threat to racial purity, the moral order of the time. The blacks were discriminated and segregated by the white Americans. They were confined in fields of housing, polity, public accommodation, schooling, and economy. African Americans had to find shelter within limited boundaries and develop their own institutions to meet basic needs, such as black churches, black schools, black businesses and clubs, black political and civic associations. As process named white flight occurred after World War II as a response to the large African migrants in inner cities, whites moved out from downtown cities to suburbs. Construction of freeways for connecting suburbs and downtowns through some ghettos and resident areas led to residents' relocation. Several public housing projects were provided for relocated residents, especially for black urban poor. Therefore, public housing areas turned into black ghettos, as later mentioned. For example, between the early 1950s and early 1960s, the Chicago Housing Authority built 33 housing projects comprising 7,000 units, 90% of which were built in neighborhoods almost all black. In tandem with the practice of redlining and mortgage discrimination, African Americans were confined seriously in the field of housing, it is extremely difficult for them to leave the ghetto. The blockbusting made by agents for seeking profit also expanded to ghettos. Hence, African American ghettos refer to areas where have concentrated and segregated black neighborhoods in the United States from the beginning to nowadays. Invisible but clear line of color exists still this day. For instance, in Harlem, in New York City, southern part of Chicago, Linwood, Compton, and what's in south central Los Angeles, Woodward, East in Detroit, and so on. Obviously, the harmony assimilated image portrayed by Word 1928 did not come true. Unfortunately, some residents in the ghettos are even living in the abyss of misery. Now, this article is from the year, let me see, 2016. Could be that some things have improved by then, but listen. This happens throughout the world, y'all. Ghettos, or better said, peripheries, are a common thing. Society decides that some people aren't worthy of life, or worthy of equality in life. These people, are not murdered immediately because they will commit a genocide on their own people, and that's not going to work well. So what they do is they make sure these people are discriminated against and violated from actually being taken care of, and people who do have compassion on them are being punished too. That's really what it's all about. So as a result, you have these criminal groups that show up, are funded by society just to make sure those people remain in that condition. And those criminals often get some perks. They're allowed to show off in luxurious places, to go to fancy hotels, all of that, as long as they keep the so-called unworthy people trapped in miserable, unworthy circumstances. Okay, I think we've done enough for now. Well, we don't have to go through this article over here. You can check it out if you want anyway. Okay, let me start the screen sharing. So let it be clear to you. The deity Pluto, also known as Hades, is still worshipped today and is institutionalized in society also. So what do we do about it as believers? It's quite simple. First of all, if you are from a ghetto as a believer, decree and declare abundance prosperity over there. Decree and declare, for example, in the mighty name of Jesus Christ, I, I bind Pluto, also known as Hades, all his worshippers, all his servants, and all groups modeled after him. I bind you all by fire. I, I arrest you and detain you into the abyss. You have no grip over my life, nor my finances, nor those of my loved ones. In Christ's mighty name, amen. Apart from that, we also decree and declare abundance, financial and economic abundance in our community. We speak it out. We also have an optimistic, realistic mindset in life, being in a state of joy. And we realize that, listen, this whole division between the peripheries and common society is artificial. Realize that there are quality people both in regular society as well as in the ghettos, and as well as the reprobates in the ghettos as well in common society. Well, as a matter of fact, the reprobates in common society are often overlooked because people so focused on the ghettos. Just realize that God may use people from places you never expected just to help you out. Okay, so get ready for that. And realize what we also can do is we as believers need to walk by faith so much that we break through financially so we become economically dominant out there. And with economic dominance, we shut down the whole thing of ghettos by investing in neighborhoods to make them better. Now, there will be ghettos here on the earth till Christ comes back, and some people simply don't want any better, but hey, that's not on us. We should not be participating in anything that's you get close to ghetto formation, y'all. So yes, the hood out there. Hold on. I want to show you one more thing. Hold on, let me share the screen again. Yes, the hood out there, ghettos better known. Uh, they are it's societal enforced poverty. That's what it is. It's done by the masses collectively. Not everyone agrees with it, of course, but it's a collective effort just to make sure there's not supply for the common people. So people don't feel as worthless on the inside. Look at this. Impoverished area. This is all done on purpose, y'all. None of this is by accident. So the ghetto lifestyle, I don't talk about the ghetto aesthetics of the, because even in ghettos, people can be artistic. Yes, there are talented people that grew up in ghettos and they're artistic, all that. So I'm not talking about the ghetto aesthetics, the art forms, whether it's rap, hip hop, or or the musical styles, all that. Except gangster rap. Gangster rap, man, gangster rap is bad. I'm not with it at all. Gangster rap is horrible. But just poetic music like rap or even activism music like hip hop, all of that, there's nothing wrong with that in itself. But the ghetto lifestyle of being impoverished and glorifying impoverishment, that is the worship of Hades, also known as Pluto. And you have quite some Pluto worshippers out here. They're even quote what they call African Americans. They should be called Moorish Americans, by the way. They could be called Moors, but anyway, they are what they call African Americans who worship Pluto even. Mystics worship Pluto. But for example, this is artistic. Even though it's not allowed by law to do this in just anywhere out there, but it's artistic. Graffiti. It's artistic style. Nothing wrong with artistic styles. Okay? For example, people doing dances. This is just human creativity. Dances, all of that. Nothing wrong with any of that. If you have dances or artistic styles that were came forth from ghetto, this is human creativity despite bad circumstances. Nothing's wrong with that. But the talk life thing, gangster rap, decline, hating on your own, killing your own, all of that, no. This is the worship of Hades, also known as Pluto. This Pluto worship right over here, y'all. And and the prison lifestyle in prisons are modeled often also after Hades, also. So yes, if you are people, if you know people, or if you're part of people who glorify the ghetto lifestyle, I'm not talking about aesthetics nor the art, but actual lifestyle, this declining these declining lifestyles, then this is who you're worshiping. Hades, also known as Pluto. That's that's the deity you rely on for your self-worth right over there, y'all. Here it is. This what you're worshiping, y'all. I just showed you open. This is who you are worshiping. This fallen angel over here. With this Nephilim hybrid animal over here, y'all. So, the ghetto lifestyle is profitable. This fallen angel will even assist you to make a lot of cash profiting off the misery of either people in prison or people in ghettos. But it's not the type of cash you should want, y'all. That's why it's called the god of, he's not an actual god, only the Father is God, but he's a deity of the dead. That means the people were abundant, and also the of riches, how to profit of people are abundant, to profit of their misery. Yes. It wouldn't surprise me if there's there were temples like this in ancient times, where a deity would sit on a throne like this, or there's such a place like this today. But anyway, I want to shut down this live stream now, because I have two other live streams I will do today. Are there any questions about this topic? Let me know in the live chat, please. Let me know in the live chat. Are there any questions about this topic? Amen. God is good, y'all. All right. Let me see. There are no questions. Anyway, I'm about to take a break again. I'm on a marathon today. This is the second of the 4 live streams I plan to do today. I plan to do 2 more. Thank you all for being here. Keep creating with Christ. Everyone, please donate the links below. Thank you very much for your support. It's needed right now. Thank you. Very much appreciate it. And I will see you in my next live stream. God is good.